Let's talk about some of the changes that have been made to TaxSlayer for tax year 2020. TaxSlayer Online. First of all, we have the refund monitor. This is the thing that normally appears in the upper right-hand corner of the screen while we're doing somebody's tax return. And the refund or balance due changes as we continue to put data into the taxpayer's tax return. Unfortunately, if you have the taxpayer watching what you're doing, sometimes they get very upset because they see a huge balance due, or they see something that just doesn't appear to be right because they're expecting to get money back. So what TaxSlayer has done, and thank God they have, they have a collapse menu in the upper right-hand corner now, so that you can actually hide the refund monitor so that the taxpayer cannot see the various changes. You can obviously show them the refund monitor at the end when you're confident in the result, but in the meantime, it's probably best to hide it. So that's a nice feature. The ability to e-file an amended 2019 tax return. Well, this is something that tax preparers have been waiting for a mighty long time. The fact that we can e-file an amendment for a 2019 tax return, and in future years we'll be able to do the same thing, is such a blessing. Mailed-in amendments have taken, in some cases, 3 or 4 months to actually be processed. It was kind of ridiculous. So now this whole e-file system for amendments is going to speed up the process significantly. So we should be able to get these things processed now in a matter of a few weeks. So that's a good move. Recovery rebate credit. So this is how TaxSlayer has implemented the recovery rebate credit. So when you look at a taxpayer's basic information, which usually talks about filing status and personal information, dependents, etc., they have added a line here for rebate recovery credit. So that's where you will find the RRC for 2020. So I'm going to go to the next screen now, and you will see yet more depth on the recovery rebate credit. Here's the next screen. So once you click on recovery rebate credit, you see this screen here. Did you receive economic impact payment in 2020? And you answer yes or no. And if you answer yes, you will see the following screen. Once you select yes, then you are presented with this box where you fill in the amount that the taxpayer actually received for their economic impact payment. Now, at the time of creating these slides, the software, I don't think, was able to actually accommodate both the payment in 2020 and the payment in early January of 2021. So I think this screen probably will change a little bit because it does indicate that the payment amount was found on notice 1444. That was 1444 was the notice that came out at the time of the 2020 payment. Some people received that back in April of 2020. So I think that text may change when they actually change this credit so that it's a combination of both the 2020 payment and the 2021 payment. And also please note that there's a note here that says this information is strictly used to ensure that you have received the full amount that you are entitled to. It will not increase your taxable income or taxes due. So there has been in the past reluctance for people to want to give you accurate information because they're worried that the IRS is going to take money away from them. But in this case, that's not going to happen. If they're entitled to more, they'll get more. If they received more than they were entitled to, they will not have to pay it back. So I think we need to reassure people because they're going to be skeptical of this box when we ask them to provide that information. The above-the-line charity deduction. This is the deduction where on a tax return, a taxpayer or a married couple can get up to $300 as an adjustment to income on their tax return, even if they don't itemize their deductions. Now, in TaxSlayer, you have to still enter this information in Schedule A under itemized deductions. So the same place we've always put cash contributions, we continue to put them there. And TaxSlayer will be smart enough to figure out that if the taxpayer is not itemizing, that those contributions will move into the adjustment to income section and will peak out at $300. Now keep in mind the $300 is per tax return. So a tax return can have up to $300 regardless of the filing status. So if somebody filed married filing jointly, it's not $600, it's only $300. So TSO will automatically determine where to put them. Here you can see that charitable deductions for adjustments to income show up on line 10B of the 1040. Now we also have Schedule LEP. This is new this year. This is the ability for the taxpayer to decide that they want all future communications from the IRS to be in their native tongue, in their native language. And so here you can see that under basic information, when you're entering taxpayer information or spouse information, you have all of these check boxes that appear. For instance, if the taxpayer is blind or if the taxpayer wishes to contribute $3. So all of these things now have an additional checkbox, which is taxpayer prefers to receive written communications from the IRS in a language other than English. And the next screen will show you what happens when you actually check that box. So here is what you see when you check the box. You see a list of languages. You select the one that you prefer, and from that point forward, all of the communications that you receive from the IRS will be in that language. The 1099 NEC is now part of the TaxSlayer Online. This is what happened here was that the 1099 miscellaneous had two boxes that used to very often be confused with one another, Box 3 and Box 7. Box 7 was non-employee compensation, and oftentimes the wrong information would be in those boxes. And so it made sense for the IRS to actually create a 1099 non-employee compensation so that it was its own entity. And so now when somebody gets compensation that is non-employee, they're not actually working as an employee, they will get one of these 1099 NECs. It's pretty much handled the same way that it was handled when it was in Box 7 of the 1099 miscellaneous. You can see here that under income, it now has its own line beneath the 1099 miscellaneous for the 1099 NEC. So depending on whatever form the taxpayer brings us, we are going to deal with it, whether it be a 1099 miscellaneous or a 1099 NEC. So I think that's probably enough information on 1099 NEC. Deferred self-employment tax. So employers, through I think it's the CARES Act. I'm not sure. There's so many of them. Has the ability to defer the employer piece of the self-employment tax, or the employer piece of the FICA tax. And so self-employed people, in all fairness, got the opportunity to do the same thing and to defer that 6.2% piece of the self-employment tax that they pay. Self-employment tax that they pay, obviously, is the FICA tax, Medicare and Social Security tax is rolled up into the self-employment tax for self-employed individuals. So employers typically pay 7.65, and then employees pay the other 7.65. and it ends up being 15.3 together. And when you're self-employed, you pay both the employer piece and you pay the employee piece. So with this legislation, they now have the ability to defer 6.2% and pay it later. And people who have household employees also have the ability to do the same thing. So an employer is an employer, and self-employed people are considered to be employers as well, even though they're only employing themselves. So this is what happens when you click on deferred self-employment tax. You see a Social Security deferral, which is optional. According to the CARES Act, you may be able to defer a portion of your Social Security tax payment. Half of the deferred taxes must be paid back by December 31st, 2021, and the other to be paid back by December 31st, 2022. And then if you click on this, if you check this box, I would like to defer a portion, then it goes a step further and allows you to complete the worksheet for that. This is the next step for the deferred self-employment tax. Here you can see that the box is checked. I would like to defer a portion of my Social Security tax. This is the 6.2% piece. Selecting continue will take you where you need to enter the preferred deferral amount. So first of all, you can see beneath the red ellipse, deferrable self-employment net earnings max equals 0. And the reason it says 0 in this particular case is because I used a tax return that really doesn't have any self-employment income on it. So if there had been a Schedule C and there had been net self-employment earnings, the 6.2% of those earnings would show up as the maximum amount here. And you can enter the earnings from 3/27 to 12/31 in that box below. And then you can click continue and decide how much you want to defer, or you can defer the entire 6.2%. And then you have 2 years to pay it off, I believe. Here we have the new Form 7202 for sick and family leave credit. It starts off establishing what the net earnings from self-employment are. It gives the preparer a chance to adjust those earnings if necessary by putting either a negative or a positive amount in that box. Were you unable to work due to COVID-19? So you would typically answer yes if you're applying for the credit. Tell us about any care that you received or provided. I required care for myself. I provided care to another. I provided care to my son or daughter because their school or place of care was closed. So it starts off that way, and then when you click on continue, you go to the next screen. Here you can see that if you click on the box, I required care for myself, you would put in the number of days that you received care, the amount of qualified sick leave wages from employer, if you happen to have any on a W-2 where your employer paid your sick leave for you. You would include that amount, which would, of course, be subtracted from what you qualified for. And then you would click continue after that. Waiver of early withdrawal penalty for taking money out of an IRA or a retirement account early for COVID reasons. So there's a Form 8915E, which unfortunately is not yet, as of this date, has not been put into Tax-Aide. So I can't really show you much on this, but we will when we have it. 4 prior tax years available in Tax-Aide Online. So we always have had the ability to go back to 3 prior years with Tax-Aide Online. Now they're giving us the ability to go back 4 years. Keep in mind now that you can only e-file a tax return that's the current year or 2 prior years. So if they're giving us the ability to access 4 prior years, 2 of those prior years would have to be mailed in. So if we chose to do a 2016 tax return at this point, we would have to mail it in. Same thing with 2017. The only things that we would be able to e-file would be 2020 and then 2018 and 2019. So the current year and the past 2 years is all we can e-file. 2-year look back for carry forward data. So because this, I guess this happened as a result of COVID as well, because so many people have not done their 2019 tax returns at this point, what we typically have is when people come to see us and they come to the same site, we usually have the ability to bring forward their information from the prior years, that, you know, their name, their address, the basic information. Doesn't bring forward any actual amounts that they earned or anything like that from the prior years, but it brings back the information that we spend a considerable amount of time typing in each year, and it's nice to have that feature where we can bring that forward. The technical term for it is pro forma. Pro forma is the act of bringing forward that information. So now what we have is the ability to go back to 2018. So the people that did not have a 2019 tax return filed, we can now pro forma from 2018 and save ourselves the time of having to type basic information into the system. Excess charitable contributions are also now carried forward. So for people that itemize, if they have charitable contributions that they are not able to use in their itemized deductions, those now get added to other carry forward amounts and can be used in future years. Tax-Aide will handle those things automatically if somebody comes to the same site from year to year. The state and local refund worksheet is now much more intelligent than it was in the past. We had the problem where if a taxpayer had a state refund that they received in the current year, it would bring up a worksheet on the current year tax return, but it made no sense for that to happen, because if the taxpayer did not itemize in the prior year, there's no taxability of the state refund in the first place. So now the worksheet is more intelligent, and it knows that if the taxpayer itemized in the prior year, assuming that the same taxpayer is coming back to the same site, it has the knowledge of the prior year tax return, so it uses that knowledge and does not bring up the worksheet. So it's a time saver for us. You can also make note of the fact that the state of Massachusetts does not issue a 1099-G, which is the form that gets issued for a state tax refund. They also know that the taxpayer did not itemize in the prior year. They get information from the Internal Revenue Service that triggers whether or not the 1099-G is actually mailed to the recipient or not. So if they didn't itemize in the prior year, Mass doesn't even send out the 1099-G, so we actually have no knowledge through a document that that ever happened. State returns are going to be more like federal returns. So one of the big complaints that people have had, tax preparers have had using Tax-Aide, is that when you get to the state return, suddenly the software works entirely differently than the federal return does. So what they've done is they have changed the look and feel of the state return to more closely match the federal. Things like the continue button. In the federal return, going to the next screen is always the continue button. Getting the data that you've entered to process requires hitting the continue button. But in the state return, there are several places where you had to hit the back button, which made absolutely no sense. So now they've changed that. Now they're also using the continue button, and they're putting the continue button both at the bottom of the page and at the top of the page, much like they have in the federal. So it's going to feel a lot more like the federal return. Also, there's a field copy and paste ability, which, to be honest with you, I didn't even know existed in the federal side. But you can copy and paste data to and from various fields in the federal return using Control-C and Control-V for copy and paste. And now, apparently, you can do it with the state as well. So that's certainly a nice feature. If you have an electronic document such as a spreadsheet or something like that, where you want to take information from the spreadsheet and plop it into a particular field on either one of the federal or state returns, now you can use Control-C, Control-V. There are fewer pull-down menus. So the pull-down menus were a bit of a problem because it required additional clicks. You'd have to click to get the pull-down menu in the first place, and then you'd have to find whatever you wanted from the pull-down menu and select that. So it was more time-consuming. So what they've done is in situations where the pull-down menu had only two choices, like yes or no, they did away with the pull-down menus and replaced it with radio buttons. So there are two radio buttons. You just click on the one that you want. So it just saves you a click. And in doing tax returns, every click that you can save saves time, and time is money, but not in ours. Not in our case. Direct debit now supports partial payments. So if somebody chooses to do direct debit for the balance due that they owe, and they can't afford to pay the whole thing, but they can afford to pay half of it, let's say, or any amount, they can essentially put in partial payments, and those direct debits will happen electronically. So that's something that we couldn't do before, so this is something new. Thanks for watching.